You're muted, but I see a visible yes from Teresa.
Okay. Yes, we are recording. I see the light. Okay, awesome. So thanks for coming to today's meeting to hear a bit about the work Ecotrust is involved with here on the west coast of Vancouver Island with the First Nation Fisheries. My style of presenting today, I was going for kind of fun, casual. So if you want to jump in with quick questions or any kind of clarifications, I know we kind of get caught up in some jargon in the Fisheries Department. So yeah, just jump in, raise your hand. I think Teresa or Renee will monitor hands, and I'll give a bit of a pause at the end of each slide if you want to jump in there. And then if we end up, you know, we're feeling like it's going to turn into a bigger discussion, we'll just we'll revisit that at the end of the presentation. There'll be time for some questions and discussion there. So when I thought of putting this all together, Renee, if you want to jump to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, when I thought of putting this all together, my first thought was, where do I start with this? It just feels like there are a number of moving parts in this fishery. And then I realized that's exactly where I should start to explain it. So who's involved in these fisheries? In our staff calls, we're talking about external partners occasionally, and my day-to-day life is actually spent communicating and working alongside with people that are not Ecotrust employees. The organizations we have involved in the management of this fishery include the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, aka DFO, Ha'oom Fisheries Society, and of course, Ecotrust Canada. So from Ecotrust Canada, we have myself. I am the project coordinator and deployment supervisor, which is a developing role that continues to evolve year to year based on the growth and needs of the monitoring program. And then we have Renee, who is the project manager and my direct supervisor, making sure I'm doing everything needed to fulfill our responsibilities. We have Diane, who provides support for the program as past Ha'oom project manager, and she's also our key contact with DFO regarding observer designations. And then Rachel as well. She is our strategic lead for all fisheries programming. So I'm on the ground. I live in Ucluelet and commute to Tofino on a regular basis. So yeah, I'm on the ground talking to fishers, working at the docks, offloading fish, collecting data. And then I have these amazing people supporting me at a higher level, making sure everything is running smoothly. And also with us today, we have some of our dockside monitors. I've invited them to this call today, and we have, I think I saw Cassandra, Michelle, and Vanessa on the call with us. So if you saw some faces at the beginning or some names that you didn't recognize, that those are our dockside monitors, all located here in Tofino. Thanks for coming, guys, and supporting me. Renee, do you want to go to the next slide? So I mentioned Ha'oom Fisheries Society and these, you know, these moving parts and organizations that are involved. And I just wanted to start off also by clearing up some of these names that we're using. So Takwiak, Ha'oom, Five Nations. In the past, you've probably heard all these names thrown around in the Fisheries Department, almost interchangeably, maybe even seeming a bit arbitrary to what one we're using. And to describe the names, I'm just gonna have to go into a little bit of the history of the development of the fishery. I'm reading a section I took from the Takwiak website because I thought it put it fairly succinctly. So in 2009, the BC Supreme Court recognized the Aboriginal rights of 5 Nuu-chah-nulth nations, Ahousaht, Ahadassit, Heshquiet, Taloquiet, Mochit, Muchlet, to catch and sell species traditionally harvested within their territories. Since that time, Canada and the nations have been discussing ways to create economic fisheries that work for First Nations and coastal communities. So basically, these 5 nations, Nuu-chah-nulth nations, came together. We have a right to fish these traditional species on our territories. Went to court, won, and a demonstration fishery was born. It opened under and operated under a branch of the Nuu-chah-nulth Tribal Council, or NTC, and they called it by the Nuu-chah-nulth name Takwiak. Takwiak is actually a tool used by the Ha'oom, or hereditary chief, to grant permission to fish. So the Ha'oom would give specific community members Takwiak. So now there's this commercial First Nation fishery called Takwiak, and it's a demonstration fisheries with ongoing discussion on what the final regulations and management details are going to be. But in the meantime, it's agreed that the federal commercial regulations would apply to the fishery, and that includes dockside monitoring of all landings for fish being sold commercially that must be done by a DFO designated monitoring organization. So now Ecotrust becomes involved to provide that monitoring service for the commercial fishery. The fishery and participation develops and grows. Fast forward a few years, I'm brought on in June 2019, and shortly after, Takwiak ends up separating from the NTC now that they've grown and they become their own identity. And with this separation, they have a chance to rethink their direction and their identity. And the nations realize that the use of the word Takwiak maybe isn't the most appropriate going forward. They felt like it was taking away from the original meaning of the word. So going forward, it would be referred to as the Five Nation Fishery, and the organizational body would be Ha'oom. And this is a Nuu-chah-nulth word that means something tasty or good to eat. So quick recap on the words that we're using here. Takwiak is fishing with permission from the Ha'oom, also used to be used in reference to the Five Nation commercial fishery. Ha'oom Fisheries Society is the organizational body that facilitates the Five Nation fishery, also Nuu-chah-nulth word for something tasty or something good to eat. And the Five Nation fishery is the commercial demonstration fishery comprised of the 5 participating Nuu-chah-nulth nations. And each of those are represented by a fisheries manager. So that's kind of some clarification. And this is where we're situated. What we're looking at here is a map. The dark green on this map is representing Nuu-chah-nulth territory here on the West Coast. And if we zoom in on the Nuu-chah-nulth nations that I mentioned that are participating in this fishery, we can see them here and how they are spatially related to the colonial place names we may be familiar with, such as Tofino, Gold River, Tussis, Zabalos. So that's kind of what we're working with, where we are. And here I have a chart just to get an idea of the fishing areas that the nations have access to. These are the areas that they were able to prove in court that the Nuu-chah-nulth have been traditionally fishing. And the nations do have an agreement with each other that each nation can fish in any of these areas, even though this chart or court-defined areas here are separated by each nation. They agreed that they can fish in each other's territories.
Hey, Gwen, is there
Yes.
a quick answer to why the one nation didn't have the same, whatever it is, 1 mile boundary extension now, but the other 4 did? The most northerly nation?
Yeah, so it does go out to 9 miles up at Ha'oom at the top there. I think that was just where they were able to prove that they have been traditionally fishing for
interesting. All right,
those
thanks.
years. And yeah, it's kind of interesting that because we talked about it before, why these Nuu-chah-nulth nations won in court, and other similar territories and nations did the same thing but did not win in court. They weren't able to prove that they were fishing these traditional territories and species, and it was because this area had such a wealth of written record from like logbooks from sailors from a long time ago. So I found that interesting. So now why Ecotrust Canada? And just a little bit of a background on the monitoring that Ecotrust Canada has. In 2008, Ecotrust Canada began pursuing small boat-scaled monitoring technology, which created local affordable monitoring for coastal communities in BC. In 2013, Ecotrust Canada became the first charitable organization to obtain corporate certification to deliver dockside and at-sea fisheries monitoring programs. This corporate certification enabled the organization to continue focusing on building resilient communities through working as a third-party service provider for coastal community partners, including First Nations, industry, and regulators. As the fisheries monitoring program developed, the importance of creating locally based fisheries monitoring became apparent with our community and First Nations partners. Ecotrust Canada is currently involved with local partners to provide data collection, biosampling, dockside, and at-sea fisheries monitoring programs in coastal communities across BC. We're most active in the observing program and training, with the nations represented by North Coast Skeena First Nations Stewardship Society, Metlakatla Stewardship Society, and of course the the New Chunlith Nations, supported by Ha'oom Fisheries Society. Through these programs, First Nations on the BC coast are achieving the dual outcome of creating employment for community members, while at the same time demonstrating their capacity and authority for managing fisheries resources. So Ecotrust Canada involvement in the Five Nation fishery specifically, as I mentioned, we provide the monitoring. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about that. All commercial fisheries need independent third-party verification through monitoring. And this is so that no one can have any cause to doubt the integrity of the data collected in each fishery. So yeah, Ecotrust is one of those organizations that can provide third-party service. And we go through a lot of steps each year to maintain this certification from DFO. So yeah, Ecotrust's role in this fishery is to provide this monitoring service. We make sure useful data is collected and delivered. And what I mean by useful is that the data is accurate, unbiased, timely, and independent. Ecotrust works closely alongside Ha'oom and DFO to ensure all monitoring regulations are being met, and also that Ha'oom's directional goals are being achieved for the fishery. So yeah, why Ecotrust Canada? There are other monitoring companies that have that same certification and the same DFO issued certification for their dockside monitors as well. So what is Ecotrust doing differently as a charity, as an organization that has maybe a different mission and goal than some of the other for-profit monitoring companies that we have in BC? Well, there is a joint focus with Ha'oom and Ecotrust to build resilient communities by creating locally based fisheries monitoring. So that kind of sets us apart. If you haven't been on the website recently or are new to the Ecotrust fold, I'll just remind us of our mission statement. So this is just taken from our website. Ecotrust Canada works with rural, remote, and Indigenous communities towards building an economy that provides for a healthy and resilient natural environment, sustainable and abundant energy, food and housing, prosperous and meaningful livelihoods, and vibrant cultures and inclusive societies. And we say building an economy that provides for life. And then I have, this is the mission statement that I took from Ha'oom's website. And I'll just highlight this one section for you because it's really long. Includes implementing fisheries for the Five Nations based on their inherent and constitutionally protected Indigenous right to harvest and sell fish, enhancing the capacity and role of the Five Nations in the management and sustainability of fisheries. So we can see how we're kind of aligned with Ha'oom's mission as well. So continuing with why Ecotrust is involved and what we're doing differently based on these mission statements and what that actually looks like on the ground. What we do differently, we hire from communities versus flying in employees for one shift, which some of the other companies do. We prioritize hiring of Indigenous candidates who have a working knowledge of Newfoundland culture and fishing practices. So when hiring, I go through quite a few extra steps to make sure that our job posting is shared through all avenues where it would best reach members of the First Nation communities that are participating in the fishery. We consult with Ha'oom on fishery goals, and we adjust our program protocols to be inclusive of Ha'oom's goals and also Newfoundland culture. So just a quick example of that, we include the Newfoundland names of fish species on our validation record forms and in the database that we use. We work closely with fisheries managers to increase capacity in rural locations. And some examples of that is sharing and managing equipment together. We have Ha'oom and fisheries managers involved in training new monitors. We work together to come up with creative ways in managing just logistics of communicating with monitors and with fishers in places that are rural. And like, for example, sometimes there's no cell reception. So we have to, I might call the fisheries manager and figure out what the fishers are doing. So it's kind of on the ground of what that ends up looking like. And what is the end goal here? So as First Nations communities continue to negotiate with the federal government regarding rights, title, and the authority to manage their traditional lands and waters, we do expect that the scale of our work and the way it's delivered will dramatically change. And our vision is, when we say, to work ourselves out of the job. Our mission is not to be a monitoring company, but rather a mechanism through which Indigenous communities can take on the responsibility for managing and benefiting from the fisheries in their territory. And moving along, what is a project coordinator? So what is my job? What do I do? As the project coordinator, it's my job kind of in a nutshell. During open fisheries, I hail out fishers for their trips, and I hail fishers in, and I make sure that there is a designated monitor there to meet them at the dock when they offload. And I do this for Gold River, Tofino, and Zabalos. I manage the monitors in each location. Last year, we had a total of 13. So I just, that includes like timesheets, scheduling, harassment, general concerns, well-being, and just making sure that they're feeling supported in their role and confident in their responsibilities. I also enter the data collected into our database and catch any mistakes or missing pieces, just kind of the first initial screening of that data. Together with Renee, we hire and train the dockside monitors to meet the increase in fishery participation over the summer months. We attend management meetings with DFO, Ha'oom, and the Nations Fisheries managers on a weekly basis to give monitoring and biological sampling data updates and also insight to enforcement issues. And then out of season, Renee and I participate in postseason and preseason meetings with DFO, Ha'oom, and the 5 participating nations. And then we work on updating protocols, maintaining equipment, get ready for the next season. And then I sometimes jump onto some other Ecotrust projects and enjoy some downtime in the winter months. Monitoring at the dock. So what information are we taking? The 3 main responsibilities of the dockside monitors is to collect catch data, biological samples, and report irregularities. And I'll just briefly go through each one of those. So we're required to collect catch data. Basically, this is all the info on what's being caught. Where we get this from is the landing slips and fishing logs. The landing slips are also called validation records, and they're pretty straightforward. The gist is getting the total weight and piece count for each species offloaded, And these form books come in triplicate. So the carbon copies act as proof that the fish has been legally caught and validated by a designated monitor. So that can be used as a sales slip for the truck drivers, so that, you know, if they got pulled over, they know it wasn't poached or something. The fishing logs are also very important to get. Fishers fill out a log page for every day on the water as they're fishing, and it includes additional information such as the area they're fishing in, species and pieces released at sea, and can also give an idea of how much participation is happening in the fishery. And here's just a quick example of our current validation record form on the left, including the new child names for the species. And then on the right, that is an example of a fishing log that the fisher would fill out at sea. Biological samples include DNA and CWT, or coded wire tags. For DNA, we collect a tissue sample from the fin of Chinook and coho with a hole puncher, like literally a paper single hole punch. Like we get them from Staples. And we take that either from the adipose or the tail fin, and that gets stapled onto a sheet of paper called a Whatman sheet, along with the fishing date, the date it was caught, if it had adipose fin on or off, and we also recorded the length of that fish. And then that gets analyzed by biologists for things like the age of the fish, the diet, and can contribute to the health of the stocks. The coded wire tag program, or mark recapture program, it's sometimes called. In this one, we use a yellow, this big yellow wand, we call it. And if there's more than 30 fish, we use this big tube chute. It's called an R9-500. And we use that set up with some sorting tables. And we use those to see if the fish has been tagged or not. Basically, they're metal detectors to see if the fish has this small tag in its snout. If it does, we take the head off. So if we hear a beep from our equipment, we take the head off, and we also take some more information from that specific fish. We take the length, if it's home use, and what that tag is, what we're looking for. It's this tiny tag about the size of a grain of rice, and it has an individual ID attached to it. It's put in the fish when it's released from some hatcheries in Canada and the States. And they're using that to track the movement of fish, how far they travel, and get a better understanding of the wild versus hatchery stocks. So when they get that head back to the lab, they find the little tag, get the ID, and then they can see where that fish ended up and where it started. And then just also on the topic of tagging fish, but not necessarily biological samples, monitors are required to tag each halibut tail, specifically the species halibut, with a Ha'oom tag marked with the date landed, the skipper's name, and the validation record number. This is just to show that the halibut was caught legally and has been validated. And that also, like all of the halibut commercially caught, has to have a tag put in by a monitor. This is just an example of the Whatman sheet that I talked about. On paper, it seems easy, but then sometimes at the dock, it's windy and your hands are covered in fish guts and whatnot. It can get a little bit messy. So those are the tissue samples that we hole punch out of the fin, and then they're stapled on because we found they were falling off and getting all mixed up in the envelope. So we started just stapling them onto the sheet. The next photo I have, that is our monitor Brooke at 4th Street, and she's using that metal detector to see if there is a coded wire tag in the snout of that fish. The next photo, we have some beautiful halibut, and the tails you can see are tagged with the information, the skipper, the date landed, etc. And the next picture is just an example of what that tag looks like on the other side. That's the biological sample is. And lastly, monitors are required to write irregularity reports if necessary. It's just a tool used to record anything out of the ordinary that happens at the offload. A lot of the times it is used to document if something at the landing happens that goes against the fishing regulations, the fishing license, the Fisheries Act, but not always. And it's not necessarily that the fisher is doing something wrong. Sometimes it might be the monitor. We're all human. We might make a mistake, forget to do something, or it could be, a piece of equipment wasn't working properly, anything to report any oddity at the dock that would give us more information. And then next, I just wanted to touch on where that information goes. So what happens after why are we doing this? The catch information that I mentioned, the landing slips and fishing logs, all get entered into a large database, and access to that is given to Ha'oom Fisheries Society, and summaries of it are given to the fisheries managers. And all of this information is compiled to give us an image of the whole fishery. The more data available, the better or more accurate that image is. And it's important to have a good image of what's going on in the fishery because it's used to back up the decisions made on how to manage it. And that includes in-season management decisions that come out from our weekly meetings, like what to do with each nation's quota, how much quota has been taken so far, how many pieces are remaining, etc. And also, it's very important for long-term management decisions to keep the fisheries managed properly so that the fish and fishery can continue to exist. The catch data is also given to DFO, and that is required to be given as a commercial fishery to comply with the Fisheries Act. The biological data collected, this gets analyzed by Ha'oom and fisheries biologists to gain insight into stock compositions. Like I mentioned, stock health, the movement of fish, hatchery versus wild, the fish age, diet, health. And again, these are entered into a database and shared with Ha'oom and DFO and used to make those management decisions. The data helps management, and it also helps to create fairness and equity in fishing, and it supports fishers for the long term. And irregularities, what happens to those? They just get submitted to Ha'oom, DFO, and also the relevant fisheries manager. And that has to be done within 24 hours of writing the irregularity. Offload locations, where is this all happening? So I mentioned Gold River, Zabalos, and Tofino. There's 2 landing sites in Tofino. So these are designated landing sites, locations that fishers have to land at. They do this because we have the people and equipment available here, and they're also like food safe, work safe, and just like logistically, it makes sense to have designated sites. So I just have found some pictures from each of them to give a bit of a visual representation of where we're actually doing this work. So this is 4th Street Government Dock in Tofino. Here, landings happen every day in the summertime. Day fishers have a chance to offload catch between 5 and 7 p.m. every single day. And there is a cash buyer there to buy any fish that's landed. And that is put in place and organized, facilitated by Ha'oom Fisheries Society. And that goes a really long way. It makes such a difference for these day fishers to go out with their little boats. And, if they catch 5 fish, they can still come in and sell it and know that there's going to be a buyer there. That can be a big hiccup for a lot of small fishers to find a buyer. So these are mostly small tin fiberglass day fishing boats. We call them mosquitoes. And they'll catch anywhere from 1 to 30 fish in a day. In the height of yeah.
Shannon has a question.
Oh, yeah, Shannon.
Hey, so that's really neat that there's a cash buyer locally on the docks. I'm
Yes.
just wondering, why don't we see this in other fisheries or other docks, i.e. Prince Rupert?
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure.
My guess would be just they don't have Ha'oom to be able to organize it. There isn't that body to orchestrate between the fisher and the buyer, and to have like, because for instance, Gwen schedules people to come down every day, and there isn't really that body in Prince Rupert and other observer companies. How it works is that the fishers will have to pay to be monitored, as opposed to this structure is different than that. So that's probably my guess of why.
Do the fishers need a business license then to be part of this? Or does, okay,
No,
just wondering.
so they
No.
register through Ha'oom, and then
Mm.
Ha'oom orchestrates the cash buyer, and then we provide the monitoring.
Okay.
And I do know that the cash buyer gets paid for his time regardless of if there is fish caught or not,
Mm.
which I think makes a difference. Yeah, I'm not sure on how that's orchestrated by Ha'oom, but yeah, I know it can be like a pretty big hiccup to find buyers when you're just fishing. You're bringing in maybe a couple fish, and maybe you don't get anything that day.
Mm. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Renee said, like outside of this fishery, I know that normally or in other commercial fisheries, the vessel foots the bill of the monitoring, and that can be quite steep. And in this case, the way we're set up, the fishers aren't footing the bill for the monitoring. So it makes it more affordable for these smaller vessels to actually just go out and catch for the day. Versus like a multi-day trip where you're more guaranteed to get a higher pay at the end. Yeah, so in the height of summer, Suha fishing, we could have 10 boats landing at this site every evening. And then this is another photo of Forest Street. They're using the crane there to get a couple larger halibut off of the vessel. And at this location, we have larger vessels or trawlers. They'll often use the crane at the end of the dock to offload larger catch from a multi-day trip. And these boats have to organize a time and date with me specifically to offload. Yeah, a lot of times they're like bigger than me, or like the weight of a halibut is bigger than me, and sometimes we try to help them, and I'm like, actually the other day I went to go pick up one of the fish, and I was like, nope, I thought I could help you, I can't. This location is Lions Gate, buyer offload and processing facility in Tofino, and vessels selling to Lions Gate will offload here. And those would also be the multi-day trawlers. And then I have another photo of an offload at Lions Gate. Again, that's Vanessa and I taking halibut tails and counting pieces as they offload one of the trawlers. I didn't have a picture of the facility at Zabalos, but this is the dock there. And if I had turned around and took a photo, we could see the ice house and the offloading facility, but it was a nice view of the inlet. And then we have Gold River Dock, and that's the fleet of Gold River, so smaller vessels again. So just to get an idea of the scale of what we're looking at, and yeah. The Ecotrust monitors we have in Zabalos, Douglas Ante, Jesse Mack, Margaret Miller. We're unable to make it for today. Gold River, Patrick Dick. And then in Tofino, we currently have Cassandra, Brooke, Michelle, and Vanessa. And then we'll be doing another round of hiring. These are our returning monitors, and we'll hire a few more in May. And Vanessa is going to be our full-time monitor this year. Again, she did that position last year, and we're really happy to have her returning. Vanessa does a lot of, or this position as a lot of offloads and a lot of data entry. And she basically does my job on weekends, so I can have a couple days off, and just because the fishery doesn't take any days off, but we need to. So yeah, so she supports the project coordinator and does that hail system on the weekends for me. And we might be seeing her face a little bit more. So the training courses, each year we do a set of training courses. We hire seasonal dockside monitors to meet the demand of that summer Suha season. Suha is Chinook. These courses are mandatory for new dockside monitors. The training program is part of the designation process for the organization, and the training is approved by DFO. The candidates must take a written test and a fish ID test to be able to get their DFO issued dockside certification. And this consists of classroom training to learn fisheries management practices and the importance of good data collection, and learn about how Ecotrust is involved in the fishery, and of course, fish ID training. And then we go down to the dock and we do some training there where we teach biological sampling, practice handling fish, and just the flow of the offload. Some more practical training. I have a couple photos of what that might look like as well. Last year, due to COVID, Diane couldn't come down and help facilitate training with me. So we had her join over Zoom. So this is Diane on the projector. We had to get a little bit creative last year, and we had everybody spaced out in this classroom setting. Yeah, so that's the classroom. Here I have a photo. I think that's Brooke and Michelle doing their fish ID test. So we do this with the help from fishers donating fish to help train, and DFO let us use their wet lab and their freezer in Tofino to put this on. So that's the wet lab into DFO wet lab in Tofino. And then I just have a photo again, Brooke and Michelle, you're popular today. Dockside training. So here we're practicing our biological sampling and handling of fish properly. I say handling of fish properly because a lot of times if you haven't grown up around fish or specifically fish that's going to be used for food, I mean, you can pick up a fish anyway and get it into a tote, but if you pick it up the wrong way, the meat will actually rip off of the bones or rip, and it degrades the quality of the meat. So yeah, so you can see in the photo, in the last photo, they're holding under the jaw where it's cut and dressed, and then also if it's a larger fish, like by the tail, you would never just pick it up by the tail. So that's kind of what we're going over there. So talking about training, now I figured it's time to train you guys with some fish ID. If you'd like to participate, I don't know if we can see the chat, but I thought I would show you a couple photos. Okay, well, Joseph, you're just on it. Okay, so this, yeah, you're right. This is Lincoln. So I thought I'd give everybody a couple seconds as we go through the photos to shout out your answers. So this is what we would see at the dock. It makes it a little bit more difficult because they are dressed and the head is off. So you might be able to see a fish, but then it can get a little bit different when it doesn't have its head on. Yeah, so that is lingcod. That's a Nuchanla, that's Tushka, and it's a very popular species that's fished out here. The next fish, we have a species of rockfish. Does anybody know what this fish is? It's a little tricky because there's, yeah, commonly known as, I feel like snapper or red snapper is a term that is used for, it's more of like a common term that is used for any kind of red or yellow colored rockfish. But yeah, yellow eye, that's right. See that bright yellow eye, and then the tips of the anal fin are a little bit black there. That helps. How about this one? I mean, we know it's a salmon, but what kind? Yeah, that one's a Chinook or Suha. And that's probably the most popular species, target species that we see landed in this fishery. I remember Diane, when she was training me a few years ago, she said, it looks like a Chinook ate a Sharpie. And it's true. The whole inside of the mouth is just completely black. Yeah, that's right. Spring salmon, springs. Yeah, it can be difficult too because we have the name, and then there's also some dock and crew jargon, and you might go to different locations and they're called something different. So you have to learn all the nicknames as well as the proper name, right? And you can see that one, we took its head for a sample. It's missing its head down at the bottom, just the jaw is left. How about this one? In this one, I'm looking at the fish that's on the top of the picture, the deeper red fish. The one underneath looks like a yellow eye, and then the one on top, it doesn't have that same bright yellow eye. It's a bit darker. Does anybody know what kind of rockfish that one is? It's a little, maybe a little bit trickier. No? Oh yeah, I should have said Fisheries Department, you're not allowed to answer. No cheating. This one is called a vermilion rockfish. And we do see that one offloaded quite often as well. I'll give that one to you. Yeah, thank you. That's the end of the presentation that I have today. And if there wasn't anything else that Renee or anybody else wanted to add, if there are questions or discussion that we wanted to have, I think we have a bit of time.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, just jump in.
I have a question. I was just wondering, I saw that Ha'oom sells to Organic Ocean. Is that the only buyer that Ha'oom sells to, or do they have other buyers?
Yeah, definitely. It is up to the fishers to organize their own buyer. However, Ha'oom does help facilitate that process in some cases. So there are a number of buyers depending where they're offloading and where they're fishing from. So there's some really popular ones, Walcan operating out of Campbell River and Quadra Island. Often if they're landing in Zabalos or Gold River, they'll sell to Walcan because it's the closest. Hub City, located in Nanaimo, Finest at Sea in Victoria will come up and do, so Nanaimo and Victoria would send a truck out to do offloads in Tofino here. And then Lionsgate will buy also from the fishers, and I didn't realize this before I started fisheries, but it's like a political relationship. It's like a very personal relationship between buyer and fisher. And oftentimes they'll even I think Hub City sometimes will say, look, I'll help finance your new boat if you sell me X amount of pounds per whatever. Like they'll work out a deal with each other. So okay, we'll sell to Hub City for the next few years because they helped me secure a loan for the new vessel. But yeah, it was way more complicated than I thought it was at first.
And Gwen, isn't there local restaurants that also buy fish in Tofino as well?
Yeah, that's right. So some of the day fishers, if the cash buyer isn't present or something like that, they'll sell to a restaurant or something like that. But it's not as secure because the restaurant obviously doesn't always need that, and the fisher might not be able to supply it that day. Yeah, so they might call around and see if somebody wants to buy it, or sometimes even the public walks down and says, hey, can I buy a fish? And they'll sell to the public as well.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering how I could buy a fish.
Yeah, you can come down to 4th Street Dock and you can buy one.
I have a question.
Yes.
Gwen, what's your favorite part of the job?
I don't know if you guys read that little blog that I did, but I think the way I described that offload was just going down to the dock in the mornings and seeing the fishers come in and they're excited about their catch. They're really happy with their trip that they had. The weather was good. The fish are a good size. Everybody's excited. And seeing smaller amounts of good quality fish coming up and seeing the pride in the offloaders and the skippers and being able to be a part of that, I guess. And just, yeah, being able to kind of like just get outside and get out, yeah, working outside on the docks and getting my hands a little bit dirty, as well as helping facilitate.
I'd love to hear the monitors that joined us to answer that question as well. If you want to, no pressure.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Favorite part of the job? I think my favorite part of the job is that it's enriched my life here and my sense of community in getting to know the fishermen and getting to know all the connections between Ha'oom, Ecotrust, the 5 Nations. Yeah, I feel like part of the ecosystem of this area and connected to the history of the area in a way that I didn't before being in this position. And yeah, being down at the water and seeing the fish is just fun. It's always fun.
Yeah, I think that's probably the same for me too. Definitely the favorite part is getting to know all the fishermen personally. They're all so funny and they're always just in such a good mood most of the time, depending on if the catch is good or not. But yeah, just getting to know all the local fishermen is so awesome. They're all just so friendly. And I feel like since getting to know the fishermen a lot better, I understand the area a lot better as well. And the species of fish, getting to see all of them come up, even though they're dead and being sold. It's pretty cool to see what's under the water when you don't really get a chance to go down and see yourself.
Cassandra, did you want to have a go at answering that? If you're with us.
Hey. Yeah, I'd say that's probably what I love about the job is being able to interact with other people. And I've never really gone fishing myself either, so it's fun to see all the fish.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Any last minute questions?
I have a question about the use of face masks. When I saw that photo of you over all that, I think it was the halibut. Did you wear face masks before the pandemic too, just to like mask some of the smell, or what? Because it seems like a natural thing to do.
What I like about this too, actually, is that the fish doesn't smell bad. That I mean, it has a certain, but it's not. Before this, I was doing hake offloads, and it's like a really bad, oily smelling fish that just like really hangs on. And the salmon, like a lot of the monitors will even just like go bare hand and be working with the fish and then just rinse your hands after, and it's like might be like a little bit fishy, but it's not actually that bad.
The sign of good fish, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, quality over quantity.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Gwen. I really appreciate you coming and talking. I think you gave a really clear and kind of beautiful picture of what the monitoring program is like in Tofino and that area. And I think that's definitely something that lots of us who don't work in the fisheries like have no kind of concept of what goes on. So thank you so much for that. That was great. And thanks to Michelle, Vanessa, and Cassandra for coming in. It's nice to have you guys here, and yeah, you're a part of the team as well.
Yeah, and if anybody's in Tofino area, you can always message me and see if there's an offload going on. If you want some fresh fish from the fishery, you can contact me. Or come see an offload in action if you want. Come do some tagging or something.
Very cool. We'll take you up on that. And yeah, I think if that's everything for today, then we might sign off there. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time.
Thank
See
you.
you soon.
Thanks, everyone.